This week, 1 year in, how is Mayor Johnson doing? Off the rails, the call for change at the top of the troubled CTA grows louder. And the VP's F-bomb, what the White House has to say about Kamala Harris's strong language. Thanks for joining us. I'm Paris Schutz. We've got something new here we're tentatively calling Paris on Politics. Each week, we're going to bring you the analysis of the biggest political stories of the week, whether they come from the back rooms of City Hall or out on the street in the neighborhoods. And we start tonight with an anniversary. On Wednesday, Mayor Johnson marked 1 year in charge. To say it's been a roller coaster would be an understatement. From the migrant crisis to crime to heated debates over the war in Gaza, Johnson's inaugural year has been packed with challenges. But has he risen to those challenges, and is he ready for his biggest test yet, marshaling the city through August's Democratic National Convention?
We can build a better, stronger, safer Chicago. We just have to look deep into the soul of Chicago.
The soul of Chicago, tested early and often. First, on the migrant crisis. Tens of thousands arriving by bus from the border, a problem Johnson inherited from former Mayor Lightfoot.
What we have is clearly an international and federal crisis that local governments are being asked to subsidize.
But Johnson's handling of the crisis has been called into question.
Migrants come right in, get 51 million, and we sitting out here in our neighborhoods, we looking at abandoned buildings, abandoned houses, dope fiends, like every day.
Not just from community members angry about spending precious city resources, but migrant advocates upset about migrant conditions, like building a tent encampment in Brighton Park late last year, despite concerns about ground contamination. That decision was eventually nixed by Governor Pritzker. The death of a young boy at a troubled Pilsen migrant shelter. Months earlier, Johnson was made aware of health, safety, and overcrowded conditions at that shelter. And the mayor's back and forth on the city's pledge to contribute $70 million to state and county efforts to fund programs.
Unreliability like that is one of the reasons I think that Mayor Johnson has had a difficult time working with Governor Pritzker and has caused voters to have some concern about his ability to get things done.
Let's continue to keep our city great.
Johnson gets praise across the board for his selection of consensus pick Larry Snelling to lead the Chicago Police Department.
It does appear that we're starting to see a more coordinated police effort, one that's more responsible than what happened under David Brown.
But Johnson publicly clashes with his top cop over the use of the controversial ShotSpotter gun detection technology. Snelling believes it helps solve crime. Johnson says it contributes to over-policing in black and brown neighborhoods. And after being asked to stay away from the funeral of fallen police officer Luis Huesca, Johnson tries to fight the image that he's not behind the police.
We are proud to support and stand with Chicago Police Department.
On education, a Chicago Public School Board molded in his image as a former CTU organizer, with proposals to de-emphasize the top-performing selective enrollment schools in favor of neighborhood schools. But Johnson and CPS have a looming $400 million budget deficit and a new teacher's contract to negotiate, where the Empowered Union is asking for 9% yearly raises. On the fiscal front, Johnson keeps his promise not to raise property taxes, but fails to win votes on his signature referendum to increase the sales tax on high-end real estate to fund homelessness, dubbed Bring Chicago Home. However, the mayor gets behind the Bears' plans to build a new dome stadium with the help of $2 billion in public funds, a plan that appears to be dead on arrival in Springfield. And in City Council,
okay, let's clear the room, Sergeant in Arms. Please clear the room.
The tensest moments come when Johnson shuts down chambers after protests against Chicago's status as a sanctuary city get out of hand. And more tense moments in some frosty exchanges with the City Hall press.
We're going to try to stay focused here, despite the disruption.
He's still learning what it means to be in the public eye and to be able to be responsive to the very legitimate questions that are being asked of him in this important role that he plays in the city.
Still learning as the mayor deals with protests that threaten to disrupt Chicago's turn on the national stage when it hosts the Democratic National Convention in August.
Mayor Johnson declined repeated requests for an interview for this story. A recent poll puts his approval rating at a very low 28%. Democratic nominee Eileen O'Neill Burke is heavily favored to win the race for Cook County State's Attorney. But how would she differ from the current office holder, Kim Foxx? This week, voters got a glimpse into some of Burke's plans, as well as those of her Republican opponent, frequent political candidate Bob Fioretti.
Democratic candidate for Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke detailing her safety plan for the future, beginning with a new approach on tackling illegal firearms.
I want to form a regional gun task force. We need to cut off the supply.
Former Chicago alderman and Burke's Republican challenger Bob Fioretti believes fighting crime in a city weary of violence requires a more straightforward approach.
How many commissions, first of all, do we need? Those that have guns in their hand illegally must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
At the heart of Burke's safety plan, restorative justice for juveniles, looking beyond rehabilitation for offenders after they've committed a crime.
I want to front load resources in juvenile court and make sure somebody is checking them in at 8:30 in the morning to school.
Burke, who gave up her seat on the bench of the Illinois Appellate Court to run for state's attorney, believes the key to reversing the tide of carjackings and smash and grabs at the hands of youth offenders is keeping would-be offenders occupied after school.
The vast majority of juveniles get arrested between 3:30 and 10 o'clock at night. That's when we're going to keep them busy, and that's where I need your help.
Fioretti agrees that more needs to be done to keep idle hands busy, but he also believes there are limits to what prosecutors can and should do.
Mediation is good in a small school setting, but she's talked about mediation in all the crimes, restorative justice. Are rapists going to sit with victims? Are murderers going to sit with the victim families?
My colleague Scott Schneider with that report. Burke and Fioretti will take on Libertarian candidate and tax attorney Andrew Charles Kopinski in the November election. The Bears have at least one lawmaker in their corner in their quest to win state approval for a new dome stadium on the lakefront, although that lawmaker moonlights as mayor of a neighboring town. So why does he think taxpayers should pony up? Dane Placco reports.
I think if we miss out on this in the near future, it's a tremendous missed opportunity for the city of Chicago.
Rosemont Mayor Bradley Stevens today voicing support for the Bears' plan to use a combination of public subsidies and $2 billion of the Bears' money to build a huge new dome stadium on the lakefront.
And I think it could be something that is really, really exciting for Chicago.
That proposal got a chilly reception when the Bears went down to Springfield to pitch it a couple weeks ago. Governor Pritzker and the leaders of both the House and Senate questioning the use of public tax dollars to help an NFL team worth billions of dollars. The Bears want to extend the 2% downtown hotel tax in order to pay for part of the project, as well as hundreds of millions more for infrastructure improvements. Stevens points to a number of stadium and entertainment projects here in Rosemont that, while on a smaller scale, have used tax money to return a profit.
These are community investments. It's not so much of a handout.
Stevens, who in addition to being mayor of Rosemont, is also the assistant Republican House Minority Leader in Springfield, says the state has been giving out big tax breaks to other large and wealthy companies, including more than $800 million for Rivian in downstate Normal, and says he believes lawmakers could be convinced to vote for a Bears stadium with some political deal-making.
It all depends on the way and the manner that it's proposed, meaning is it going to be tacked on with other issues that can bring others to the table.
Stevens admits that getting a deal cut in Springfield before the session ends in 2 weeks is, in his words, a heavy lift. But he plans to meet with Mayor Brandon Johnson to forge an unlikely partnership to try to move the ball down the field. In Rosemont, Dane Placco, Fox 32 Chicago.
And straight ahead, Chicago's former top cop weighs in on the shot spotter controversy. An interesting take from Eddie Johnson right here in our studio. It's a food fight pitting a Chicago alderman against one of the most famous chefs in the world. What we didn't know about the plan to allow outdoor dining on Clark Street. And language, the vice president drops an R-rated word, why the White House says it was no big deal. We're coming right back.
The city is not rebounding back to the same levels that other comparable cities across the country are doing. And so we think it's pretty clear that we need a change in leadership because it seems to be a management operations issue. The safety is one that people feel concerned. and the buses and trains aren't getting to where they need to on time or showing up on time.
A handful of Chicago aldermen are trying to throw CTA President Dorval Carter off the train, or under the bus, so to speak. They've announced a resolution calling for his resignation as the agency grapples with unreliable service and the perception of higher crime.
Vasquez and about a dozen co-signers are now throwing Carter under the bus. They authored a resolution calling for his resignation, saying, quote, despite thousands of rider complaints about reliability, cleanliness, and safety, multiple calls for CTA improvement by City Council, and multiple news outlets frequently reporting about the CTA struggles, President Carter received at least 2 salary increases per year since 2018, a more than 60% increase over the 8 years of his tenure to a current annual salary of $376,060. Vasquez says CTA is not getting bang for its buck.
The city is not rebounding back to the same levels that other comparable cities across the country are doing. And so we think it's pretty clear that we need to change the leadership.
The resolution also mentions that council had to pass an ordinance compelling the CTA president to testify because he kept turning down requests to do so. The mayor could always fire the CTA president, but to this point has not yet done that. Thus, Vasquez says Carter should take the onus on himself.
Either folks who can't get to work, can't take their kids to school on time because they're waiting 15, 20, sometimes 45 minutes for the next bus or train to arrive, and that number tends to fluctuate. It's also safety concerns, right? There have been incidents on the train and bus systems. There are homeless folks that are living on the trains and buses.
In a statement, the CTA says Alderman Vasquez et al. Have their facts wrong. Quote, the fact is, bus and rail services have been added. Ridership is trending upward. Crime rates are decreasing and service is more reliable. All evidence that CTA's recent efforts are working.
And Chicago's former top cop is lending his voice to the debate over whether ShotSpotter, the controversial gun detection system, saves lives and is worth the investment. Our Scott Schneider talked with Eddie Johnson.
As a beat cop, I found out how important public trust is. What the ShotSpotter alert system actually does. It's a sound detection system.
Former Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson appearing in a lobbying ad supporting the controversial ShotSpotter technology, which the city will no longer deploy beginning in the fall. I caught up with the former top cop who says he learned early on the science behind ShotSpotter is sound.
There were folks that wanted to try it in kind of medium type areas in terms of gun violence. I wanted to do the top 2 districts at that time, which was the 7th district on the south side, 11th district on the west side. And I was stunned. After 60 days, we saw like a 40% decrease in gun violence.
The former superintendent is far from alone in his support of ShotSpotter. Several aldermen believe the technology not only works, it's made Chicagoans safer. Mayor Brandon Johnson remains unconvinced.
I was very thoughtful about how we dismissed that particular form of technology. But it didn't mean that I could not come up with a variation that allowed for us to collect some data and then to build tools towards what public safety ultimately really needs, which is a holistic approach.
Listen, the reality of Chicago is we have more gun violence in certain areas than in others. That's just the reality of it. I wish it wasn't like that, but it is. The critics of it, I would ask them, do you live in those challenged areas? Because one thing I know as superintendent, in areas that are inundated with gunfire, they stop calling the police.
Eddie Johnson is urging supporters of ShotSpotter to contact the aldermen in their wards through the website SaveShotSpotter.com before the current extension expires in late September.
Cooking up controversy on Clark Street, the debate over outdoor dining in a traffic-choked stretch of River North is not over yet. A downtown alderman is blasting the mayor's decision while a celebrity chef applauds it.
What's really ironic is the handful of opponents to this full street closure cite traffic concerns and public safety, when in fact we're going to have a lot of gridlock on Clark Street as a result of no curb lanes. There are a lot of beer truck deliveries that occur here, party buses come through, Ubers and Lyfts are constantly idling on the curb. Well, we don't have curbs on Clark Street under this program anymore.
Riley says he conducted a poll where 87% of his constituents supported the full closure of the street for an outdoor dining plaza, as has been done since COVID. But restaurants around the area complained the street closure would snarl traffic even further, hurting business to their establishments. Celebrity chef Rick Bayless who is constructing an outdoor dining structure, says something is better than nothing.
So we're going to build a facility that has at least a half-size wall between our customers and the traffic whizzing by. We'll see how that all goes, but we're going to orient all of the tables so that they look toward the sidewalk, not toward the traffic, because we think that people will just not feel great about all those cars and buses whizzing by.
And coming up next, Chicago teachers play hooky. The unions march to Springfield to try to get more money from the state, but suburban lawmakers are standing in the way. City, state, and suburbs next. And it's happening. Joe Biden and Donald Trump sign off on 2 presidential debates, and they're already doing a little trash talking. President Biden and former President Donald Trump have agreed to debate before the November election. The first one is scheduled to happen in Atlanta on June 27th, just a few weeks before the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. It also comes before the Democratic National Convention happening here in August. The second debate is scheduled for September 10th. Both debates will bypass the Commission on Presidential Debates, who usually hosts these events. The vice president took a page out of Rod Blagojevich's book this week. She dropped an F-bomb during a speech to Asian Americans about breaking down barriers. White House Press Secretary Karen Jean-Pierre is defending the VP's choice of words.
Look, she was passionate. She's passionate about what she believes. And that's what I think you heard from this vice president. And I think it's important.
And profanity in politics is not an unheard of event, as both former President Donald Trump and current President Joe Biden have both been caught recently using such language at campaign events and speeches. Biden using profanities in a reference to Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister. Trump led a crowd at a recent rally chanting a curse word in reference to his criminal trial in New York City. This past Wednesday, hundreds of Chicago teachers played hooky from classroom and took a field trip to Springfield. The reason to try and coax a cool $1 billion more out of state lawmakers for Chicago public schools. School CEO Pedro Martinez was there as well and set his sights just a little bit lower.
We're not asking to get in front of the line. We're not asking for us to be treated in any other way.
$1 billion won't happen this year, says school CEO Pedro Martinez, but best case scenario, a couple $100 million to fund things like programs for migrant students.
On the migrant funding alone, we would get approximately $55 million, which would be a significant influx and support for our students.
Still, a contingent of Chicago Teachers Union members took a paid day off, traveling from Chicago to Springfield to ask for the entire $1 billion, saying the state has underfunded CPS for years.
We demand, because it was promised and our kids deserve it, we have to fund our schools, fully fund them with everything that we can.
But suburban Republican lawmakers say the demands have not been well received.
For the mayor and now his minions in the Chicago Teachers Union to come down here, try to bully lawmakers into more money they claim they are being shortchanged, is absolutely outrageous.
They decided to be in Springfield today rather than be in their classrooms. I support teachers, but that's a problem.
Martinez says the day off will not harm students in the classroom.
I was very heartened to see our teachers here with me, and again, they want to share their stories.
And the teachers' visit follows Mayor Johnson's trip there last week. The governor and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have shown no indication that $1 billion is ever going to happen, at least not this year. And up next, we look into the crystal ball to preview the week ahead in politics. A committee hearing on Capitol Hill turned into total chaos this week. It came complete with name-calling and accusations of members debating under the influence. Rebecca Castor was there.
Please come to order.
But order didn't last long. While the subject of Thursday evening's House Oversight Committee meeting was a contempt of Congress charge against Attorney General Merrick Garland, fireworks between lawmakers stole the show.
You know what you're here for.
Well, you the one talking about, I
think your fake eyelashes are messing up.
That's Georgia Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene and Texas Democrat Jasmine Crockett trading jabs. Then New York's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez jumped in to defend her Democratic colleague.
That is absolutely unacceptable. How dare you attack
meeting will
the
suspend,
physical
meeting will
appearance of another
suspend.
person?
Are your
Move
feelings hurt?
her words down.
Aw.
Oh, girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play.
Baby girl?
Several Democrats petitioned Chairman James Comer to bar Green from speaking the rest of the session. But when Comer did not, Crockett fired back.
Just to better understand your ruling, if someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
A what now?
It was a radical breach of decorum.
Today, lawmakers still in disbelief. Some even saying alcohol may have been involved.
The gentlelady from New Mexico, Melanie Stansbury, raised it. She said there are members drinking in the room, and that's something that is worth investigating.
And both sides are pointing the finger over who's to blame.
Just to be very clear about who was actually calling names and doing all this horrible name calling. It was Marjorie Taylor Greene.
There was a lot of disrespect early on against Miss Greene, and that was kind of brushed over.
Despite the drama, the GOP-led committee ultimately voted to send a resolution holding Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress to the House floor for a vote. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox 32 Chicago.
Wow. And it's time to predict the big stories I'll be watching in the week ahead. First, the future of CTA President Dorval Carter. Aldermen officially introduced a resolution calling for his resignation at a Wednesday City Council meeting. Will Carter make it to Wednesday, or will the mayor bow to pressure and ask for a resignation? Second, budget making in Springfield. Governor Pritzker has proposed $800 million in new revenue, or else state agencies have to take the sledgehammer to their own budgets. Will lawmakers go along? And what about Mayor Johnson's demands for $1 billion for CPS? Even his own school CEO says that ain't happening. Third, the Trump Stormy Daniels trial. Closing arguments could happen as soon as Tuesday, and then it's in the jury's hands. Will we have a verdict next week? And what Republican vice presidential wannabes will show up to say the things it seems Trump legally cannot? That is what we have our eye on. And for now, enjoy your weekend. Stay up to date on all the news you need with Fox Chicago on air and online. So long, everyone.